Okay, there we go. Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. Cecilia here from the Replay team. Yeah, thanks so much for tuning into our weekly office hours stream. Again, my name is Cecilia. I am the community lead here at Replay. So I do these streams every week. We'll bring on guests from the team to chat about different things, talk about debugging, recent releases from Replay. You can see us at replay.io on Twitch and Twitter, or at replay.io/YouTube. So wherever you're tuning in from today, you can use your platform of choice. And if you ever want to catch back episodes at replay.io/YouTube, check those out. We do a lot of demos around upcoming features, things that haven't been released yet. And so we love your feedback from the Replay community. Also do some live debugging and talking about things like that. So yeah, last week we had Travis on the stream to talk about a scrollytelling engine that he's is building out to work on our Replay landing site, and that was super interesting, super exciting. So if you didn't see that one, I highly recommend checking it out. We talk about accessibility with scrollytelling, how to simplify it and make sure that it's performant. And there's some links to the actual code sandbox, so you want to play around with it. So really exciting stuff. Travis is awesome to learn from. So highly recommend checking that out. You can also always join us in our Discord at replay.io/Discord to chat with the team. That's where we work as a team. We work in public right alongside the community. So you can see us talking about design decisions, how we're going to implement certain things, links to all of our pull requests, all of our open source work that we're doing. So yeah, come join us, check us out, replay.io/Discord. So so this week's stream is going to be a little different. Usually I will talk about changelog updates, kind of demo some new features, maybe have a guest. But this week I have been pretty occupied with working on our test suites project. So with Replay, I've kind of demoed this a few times on the stream before. You can record automated tests. So if you've used Replay before, you know that it is a browser. It captures everything that happens in the browser session. And so when you record your tests, which you can do locally or in CI, you capture everything that took place during that test run. So if you have a failure, you see all of your application source code that ran, all the network requests, all the events, so that if you have a failure, you can debug it and you don't have to try to reproduce that failed test again. And so we are in the process, so we're about to launch our closed beta for the test suites dashboard and accompanying adapters, and we're building out GitHub Actions and all this fun stuff. And so you've probably seen me, like I said, demo it before on the stream. So one of the things that we're working on is actually testing it out. So we're using it internally for our own DevTools repo. So I'll show that as well. Our open source DevTools repo has a playwright test suite that we run. So that is now configured to record with Replay. And we were recording with Replay before, but now we're using the new implementation of it and upload those recordings so that we can debug any failures. And we are also adding it to all the other projects that we work on, like Replayable, is one of the projects that we've talked about before on this stream. And yeah, just kind of doing a lot with finding open source projects that have existing test suites and then seeing if we can record them and get it set up with our GitHub Action. So I'm going to be working on that today and kind of just doing some live, I don't know if it's live coding, live dev environment setup and GitHub actioning basically. And so yeah, I think it would be kind of fun to just walk through that process, show you what I'm working on. Hopefully it can be helpful for you, especially if you are interested in contributing to open source. I'm going to go through the entire flow from pulling down, forking a project, pulling it down, figuring out how to set it up, figuring out how to adapt it, figuring out how to set up their GitHub action. So yeah, hopefully we can, and if anybody here is adept with GitHub Actions or build tools or TypeScript or, oh gosh, linting, all these fun things that happen when you're pulling down a different dev environment or a different project. Please feel free to pop in the chat and let me know if I'm doing something wrong or if you have any advice as I go along, because I'm sure I will run into things. I've been working on this for throughout the week. And so I've learned quite a lot about build steps and environments and dependencies and package managers. So that's a nice thing about working on open source projects, is that you learn a wide breadth of different tooling and processes based on what each project is working on. So yeah, so it's a really great way to learn about the development process from different lenses without necessarily having to dive deep onto one project. So I'm just going to go ahead and check Twitter, make sure we don't have any questions. So yeah, so whether you're watching on Twitter, Twitch, or YouTube, if you're on Twitch and YouTube, you can just pop a question right in the chat, and I'll be able to see that there. On Twitter, you can just respond to the stream tweet, and I'll be checking that periodically if you have any questions or any comments. So, all right, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here, and I'm going to share my screen. Make sure I'm in the right spot here. Okay, cool. And I'm going to do this view. Okay. All right. So these are our docs for recording automated tests. Just pushed in this week. Very new guide, an entirely new guide for recording automated tests with replay. So if you get a chance, you can check it out. I did mention that our test suites dashboard is in closed beta. So you can still do some of the implementations I'm going to show today. You may not get the full functionality if you're not in the beta, but yeah, so all of these tools that we're going to be working with are open source. They're all publicly kind of documented. So if you get curious and you want to try recording your own project, let us know. We can help you get set up. Right now, it is primarily configured for Cypress and Playwright using GitHub Actions. And for Playwright tests, make sure, if you use npx Playwright tests to run your tests, that's the easiest configuration. So I'll be referring to these docs quite a bit today, even though I wrote them, to have to refer to them a lot because I can't remember everything. And yeah, so first thing I wanted to show is the project that we're going to be working on. So the first step in kind of when we kind of identify a project is I just forked it under my own Cecilia Creates profile in order to make sure I could run it locally and then add replay and then run the test locally and record them. That's kind of the step that we did initially, just to kind of identify any issues with the project itself. So this is my fork of TipTap, and I actually forked it from Jason, who forked it from the original project, which is Uberdosis here. And so what TipTap is, it is headless extendable rich text editor based on ProseMirror. So it's actually a tool that that developers use to build out applications. If you want to like have a rich text editor on your page, in your website, in your app, whatever it may be. And so yeah, so we use that, and so we wanted to. Then I noticed that they have Cypress tests. So they have a suite of some Cypress tests here. They have some core tests, which do some things here, and they have extensions test and an HTML kind of test suite here. So yeah, so that is what we're kind of looking at. The other thing that I take a look at when I'm kind of evaluating a project, so they have Cypress. What is their configuration like? So are they doing any kind of custom stuff around it? And we can see here that their test command is just Cypress run -- project tests. I can make a lot of this bigger too. So that's pretty straightforward, which makes this nice. And then I also like to look at their documentation, right? Like how easy is it going to be to pull down and get set up? And so TipTap, this is their contributing guide. They actually have a link here to the contribution guide, which has some development environment instructions. This is nice and straightforward. Npm install, npm run start. That'll open the local host. You can play around with it. And then there's also just how to test it, right? So npm run test. And so when you're kind of looking and deciding, oh, like, is this a project that I want to like try to contribute to, or has it set up? Looking at the contributing guide to see what the setup instructions are is going to be really helpful, kind of for getting a sense of what you will need on your machine in order to be able to run it locally. So, for example, some projects may use PHP that you have to install. They may use Composer, which is like the PHP package manager, if it's not like a Node or JavaScript project. So those are something that you may have to then install on your machine in order to get it working. You may have to set up a database sometime. So those are some kind of things to keep in mind, and see what the instructions look like to get set up and get started. So what I've done so far in this project is I pulled it down locally. I got it up running. I have that here in my VS Code. Da-da-da. And I made a pull request last night here that adds replay. So I really only had to change 2 things to add replay. I installed the package, and then I updated the Cypress plugins file. So because TipTap is on version Cypress before 10, I'm not sure. Let me see. I'm not sure exactly what version they are, but I can check in the package.json, and I can see that they are on version 9.4 or up. I believe it was 9.7 when I ran it. Then that means that we are using the Cypress plugins file to add replay to the project. But that's the only thing that I had to change. So just get a quick install, added this configuration to the plugins folder. If you're on Cypress 10 plus, you'll just add it directly to your config file. And then I was able to record the test. The other thing that I did do is also document that process. So in the contributing guide on my fork, I just have the really quick kind of setup instructions that came from the other contributing guide, and then how to run the tests, record the test with replay. So that's to record it locally. And we can see that we have some tests. I was able to get those uploaded. Let me go ahead and actually show you what one of them looks like. Get that pulled up here. My other screen. All right, so this is a replay of one of the TipTap tests. That's TipTap tests. This one actually has no test found because it looks like that was all set. Let me go back. Let me pull up a little bit different one. TipTap Cypress. Here we go. Yeah, so a lot of these, it says that there's no test found. Let me go back to, oh, here's one that failed. That might be interesting, actually, to see. And this is essentially what the replay library looks like with the test suite. So we have the different test runs, and we have the corresponding tests here. So this is an example of a failing test that was recorded with TipTap. So I'm gonna go ahead and start from the beginning, and it's gonna go ahead and run, loading up. Looks like it's a 50-second file. Okay, so we can see the Cypress test running. That test passes. And because Cypress uses the same browser session for an entire spec file, all of the tests are in one replay. We will be working on kind of breaking that out or identifying like where each test starts. But here's where we can see is where the test is failing, right? So right now it's pending. So Cypress has built-in waiting. So it's waiting to see, it's expecting the div to have the text hello world. And so I'm just going to kind of back up a little bit here. So yes, okay, so we're going to get the React component. So we invoked that we has a text. We're typing hello world first true. So it looks like it's trying to type it and then expecting the div to have a test in it. And it's got a long timeout, which is probably configured in Cypress.json. And so expected to have it hello world, and it did not. So it didn't actually, but we could see on the DOM, right? We could see that it wasn't actually typing. Like we don't see anything in the DOM. So that makes sense why the test failed. So it's kind of a little curious here. I won't go into debugging this right now, but now you could go in, you could debug it, you could see maybe what happened when that type command fired, why it didn't actually type, or if it was something that actually happened with the application. Was it a regression? Does it no longer type anymore? And you can debug that. So that's the point of recording these tests with replay, is in order to be able to debug a failure that happens when you record it or when you run it. So the next step that I want to do is actually get this set up to run with GitHub Actions. So right now you have to record the test while running it locally and then upload it. So that is something that you can do with replay. However, really, like, if you think about it, most people run their tests in CI, and that's where replay really shines, because it's really hard to reproduce failures that occur in CI, again, locally. And we have built out some GitHub Actions in order to let you do that. So in the, here's a fork, for example, of the Cypress Real World app, which is, if you've never seen the Cypress Real World app, it's really great if you write Cypress tests. It is the Cypress is kind of flagship demonstration app. It's a full stack React app, along with an entire suite of tests, API, UI, and I believe they have component tests now, that basically demonstrates all the best practices, the different use cases, all the different things that you can do with Cypress, and how to have like implement a good test suite. And so this is a fork of that project, because it's a suite of a full suite of Cypress tests, and we kind of run those tests and record them. And this is what we're trying to get to. So we have a GitHub action that will record the tests. It'll post a comment back with the link to the replays that it uploaded. And this is essentially just using, I can show you what the GitHub action workflow file looks like. And it essentially is just like a simplified version of the original GitHub action file from the Cypress Real World app, but it is using this action Cypress from replay. And we're passing through our API key, we're passing through the name of the browser we want to use, and we're making everything public, and we're uploading all of them. So not just failures, but all tests are getting uploaded. And this is after all the build steps that were already existing in the action. So yeah, I want to get to that point with TipTap. So first thing I want to do, though, is actually I want to do this under the replay organization. So far, this was kind of just like an initial proof of concept, but I think it would make more sense to have this as a real replay project, so that everyone kind of can see it and contribute to it, and it's under that replay banner. So yeah, so the first thing I'm going to do is actually go back to the original repo here, the main repo, which I'm going to give a star too while I'm here, and fork that. So I'm going to go ahead and check and see if there's any questions. Cool. All right, we're looking good. So yeah, this is kind of zoomed in a little bit, but if it needs to be bigger, y'all can let me know. And I'm just going to fork this. So I'm going to fork it as replay. So now it's going to be done as replay, and I'm going to go ahead and create a fork. And so now I have my own version of this that I can work on. And I'm going to go ahead and close this. This is my personal fork of TipTap, so I'm going to go ahead and close that, because now I want to work in this replay IO one. I'm going to go ahead and open my terminal too. And so I have a workspace, but I want to keep this separate because it's going to be under the replay org, and I want to be able to keep both on my machine. So I'm actually going to make a directory called replay workspace. Maybe actually I'll do replay OSS projects. Let me do that. And I'm going to CD into that directory. And then this is the directory that I'm going to clone the repo into. That way it's different from my other workspace. And I use the GitHub CLI, which is really, really awesome. I highly recommend it. It's cli.github.com. You can just install GitHub GH, which is what I did. And it's really fast, super easy. I don't have to mess with anything. It just works. I don't have to mess with my SSH. I just installed it. I just logged in, and it just kind of handles everything for me. So if you previously would kind of use these commands here, like git clone and then that type of thing, you can just use the GitHub CLI. There's also GitHub Desktop, which I've used before, but just kind of got used to GitHub CLI. So I just copy that, and I'm going to go ahead and clone that into my replay OSS projects directory. And yeah, let that install. And I'm going to go ahead and pull those contributing instructions up in the meantime here. So yes, this is the git clone instructions. If you were to use that, same thing I just did, except I just did the CLI version, the GitHub CLI version. Okay, cool. So that has been cloned down. So I'm going to go ahead and now I'm going to cd into TipTap. And I like to just then open it in my code editor. So I cd into the folder, I just do code dot, and that opens it in my VS Code. And oh yeah, this is as I create a new workspace. Yes, trust that. So now I have this project TipTap opened up in my code editor. And from here, I'll use the terminal inside VS Code. And again, it's going to be npm install, npm run start. Pretty straightforward. That's great. Love that. So npm install. I have pretty good internet, but I'm also streaming, so hopefully this doesn't take too long. But oh yeah, it wasn't bad at all. Nice. Okay, and then so npm run start. And wow, that is fast. Beat. Oh, this is using Beat. I never used Beat before. I think I may have noticed that last night, but I wasn't paying attention. That was very, very, very fast. Wow. Okay. So also these scripts too are in here. So you can see that like when I did npm run start, it was actually doing npm prefixing /demos run start. So it's running the demos, right? Because TipTap is like it's a package. It's something that you like use to build out the rich text editor. So you can't really start it. But what it's doing is it's actually starting these demos. And so in the demos directory, this is where there's like all of these examples. So we have examples, experiments, extensions, guide content, modes, and that is what's being tested. It's these demos. So if I go to my localhost 3000, I pull that up, really it's just like a bunch of these demos really. And I can click on one, I can click on the React version, the Vue versions. I can go, oh, this is editable. It is, yeah, that's a Vue component. I can do this one. And this is select this text. Oh, makes a bubble menu. Cool. So this is all like the different components, functionalities, whatever it may be that you can use TipTap for, all designed out as examples in React and in Vue. And that is what you run the tests against. You run them against these examples. And so that is what's running on our local machine. And the next step would be in a new terminal to then run the test. You just kind of do your Cypress run -- project test, or you can do npm run test. So you go ahead and just do that really quick, just so it validates Cypress for the first time. So if you've never used Cypress before, it does have to validate Cypress. So I'm going to do npm run test. I think I might just be able to do npm test. Oh, I can't remember, but that's okay. I've been switching between Yarn and npm, which was I'm working on a bunch of different projects right now, open source ones. So it's going through. Okay, cool. So it just started kicking out the tests, and you can see there's 146 tests, 146 specs actually. So that's quite a beefy test suite. That's great. So it'll give us a lot to work with here. That's also why earlier when I was recording these tests locally, and then I uploaded all of them, I created quite a bit of replays. So a couple things to notice here too. It is creating videos of each test because Cypress will do that by default. So when you're recording with replay, you may not need video screenshot because you're going to have the replay. It's up to you. I tend to turn that off when I'm recording with replay, just to speed it up and not have to compress the video. But I'm going to go ahead and stop this test run with Control-C. So we're able to see that the tests are running against their passing. Everything looks good. We have pulled this down. We are successful. Huzzah. So yeah, so the next thing that we want to do now is we want to add replay. So I always like to run the test first before I do that, just because then if the tests break, I know that it wasn't my fault. It was like, they were already broken. So if anything happens, it's my fault. So I'll go ahead and close this out. I'll clear this out. And I always like to just git status like all the time. It's almost like, yeah, so we're in origin main, modified package lock.json. So whenever you do an npm install, if there's anything that's been changed, then it'll update. I'm gonna go ahead and check out a new branch called add replay that I'm gonna be working off of. And yeah, so as I'm gonna be kind of using this in the docs, it's a pretty, is a kind of a quick start configuration, which is like if you're using Cypress, if you're using the latest version, if you're using GitHub Actions, like this is the fastest way to get up and running with recording test replay. So I'm going to kind of be referring to that, but really this is because this is pre-10, it's going to be a little bit different. But first thing you know is you just run it as npm I replayo set Cypress. So I'm going to do that. So npm I at replayo / Cypress, and that's going to install in my project as a dependency. So there it is, replayo / Cypress. Oh, nice. The new version 2.2.3 just released like 45 minutes ago, I guess. Or yeah, 45 minutes ago. So that's the updated version. And the next thing I need to do is I need to update to add the plugin, essentially. So if I was in a post 10 Cypress project, I would be adding this to my Cypress.js file. But because I am in a pre-10, I have cypress.json, which is not a JS file. So instead, I need to put this in my plugins file. So Cypress pre-10 provides a plugins file for you to be able to essentially extend the Cypress behavior. Oh, hey, Bakari. Nice. Nice to see you. It lets you extend the Cypress behavior, and that's essentially what Replay is tapping into in order to provide the Replay browser to record and run the test. So there's already some stuff going on here that I can just kind of like sneak into. And what I'm going to do is I'm essentially just kind of just declaring Cypress replay from the replay package. And I think it needs to go before a pack preprocessor. Oh yeah, my linter is going to get mad at me. That's the other thing too about switching between different projects all the time, is they all have different linting conventions. And it's always, and like my linter doesn't play nice with all the time. So anyway, and then essentially this setup node events like this is inside the config file for post 10, but I'm just going to add it inside of my plugins file instead. So we'll go ahead and come back to our code editor. And inside of our module.exports, so the thing is here, actually I'm going to pull up an example from the Cypress sandbox. Yeah, here we go. So this is legacy Cypress sandbox. It's like a very, very tiny repo that literally just has the Cypress example tests from pre-10 so that I could kind of see what needed to be done. And we can see here that module.exports on config is what we need. So we need to have both on and config pass through returning config. So this is like the literal minimum that you would need to do to add replay. And so I need to add config here to my function. So that way I can then put this down here at the bottom where I have my Cypress replay. So essentially I'm using Cypress replay from the package. And I'm saying that default, which is just the default function that gets exported from it. I'm passing through on and config, which are provided by Cypress. So can read more about that in the plugins guide. And then I'm returning the updated config because essentially this function, the package, updates the Cypress config to add the replay browser. So it adds the replay version of Chromium and the replay version of Firefox. And so that is what's happening here. We're essentially just saying, hey, existing Cypress config, like add these browsers, return the new config. So we're doing this inside of our plugins file, again, because in a post-10 world, you have a Cypress config file that is a JS file. And that is how you would do it going forward. So in Cypress 10, you would just write inside of your defined config, there's a setup node events function. And that setup node events essentially replaces the plugins file. So with Cypress 10, they deprecated the plugins file. They give you the setup node events function inside of your config instead. and that's where you can tap into it. But because, again, we're in a pre-10 project, we're going to do it in our plugins file, and everything should still work the same. The only other thing that I want to change, and I'm going to just take this right here, is I'm going to update our Cypress.json to include screenshots and videos as false. And that's just my personal preference. So I'm just going to add that right into the Cypress.json. And so again, the three things that we've done, if I do a git status, you can see that we package.json was modified because we installed replay.io/Cypress. The Cypress.json was modified because I turned off screenshots and videos. And then the plugins file was modified because I just essentially added in that code to tap into the replay package to make the browsers available. So what that does is essentially gives us two new browsers to work with Cypress. So we now have, like I mentioned before, there's two versions. So Chromium is in beta, and it only works on Linux, so you can't really run it. I can't run it locally. And then Replay Firefox is for Mac OS and Linux. And so when you're running it locally, it's like this kind of really, you have to pass through some environment variables, and there's like a command. And essentially what you're doing is you're adding this -- browser tag, and you're passing through a browser. If you don't pass a browser, it's going to run it in Electron. It's not going to record. It's just going to do a normal run. So now that I've made these changes, like I could still do start my host, npm run start. And I can still do my npm run test. Yeah, my npm run test command, and it's still gonna run the Cypress test like normal, but it's gonna use the default Electron browser because I didn't pass a browser tag. So you can see Electron 100, it's running it. So basically like replay is just kind of there, and it's giving you the browsers. But if you don't pass the tag, if you don't say, hey, I want to record this, then it just runs your test suite like you normally would. But say I run the test suite, had a failure, then wanted to record it, then I have that available. The browser's available now locally on my machine. But really, again, the magic comes from recording in CI. Test failures in CI are very, very hard to reproduce. So I was on the Cypress team for about 2 years, and I would work. I worked directly with our users, and I did a lot of support success, working with them, and a lot of trying to troubleshoot failing tests in CI. And this is something where as soon as I saw it, I was like, that would have made my life so much easier to not try to have to reproduce everything, but to just have a recording of what happened. So that's the next thing that we're going to get set up. So I'm going to go ahead and commit these changes first. So git status, git add. And I do get add dot. I don't know if that's a bad practice or not, but that just adds everything that I changed. That's why I get status first, so I can see what I'm adding. But it may be a better practice to add things one by one. So I apologize if I'm sending out bad coding practices. But just checking the chat. Okay, perfect. And then so I added the files. Now I'm going to commit them, and I'm just going to do adds replay plugin and removes screenshots. Oh, nice. Okay, thank you, Bakari, for the validation. So Bakari says, I use add dot too. So I feel a little better now. Somebody told me one time that it's not good to do that, and I did not listen to that because it takes forever to type out everything individually. And remove screenshots and videos. And okay, so this project also does have a pre-commit hook that'll run the lint. And so it just ran a lint. I didn't break anything. That's good. Yeah, so I committed those changes. So if anything breaks from here on out, I can at least revert back to that. So the next thing that I want to do is take a look at the GitHub action. And I'm going to go ahead and do git push git push u origin add replay, I think is yeah. I'll go ahead and push these changes up as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at the GitHub action. So this project has some existing workflows. I was looking at them earlier, and I think I have a plan, and so we'll do that together. But yeah, so let's go ahead and take a look. So it might be easier to look sometimes it's easier for me to see like on GitHub if it's just brighter, but this is the code here. This is fine. We can look at this one. It's the same as the original. So here's the workflows that they have already. There is a PRs workflow, which essentially looks like it just kind of adds pull request to TipTap project, which they must use GitHub projects and they want to add it to there. There's an issues pull request, or an issues workflow when a new issue is opened. It also adds to the project. We don't really need those. There's a deploy, which when you have a push to main, it deploys, updates the documentation, it does that deploy. And then there's this build one. And I think this is the one that we're going to look at based on what I saw earlier. So what this GitHub Action workflow does, and I'll make this even bigger because I know the font is probably very small, just while we're reading it. So let's see if I make, okay, this is like hopefully good. So on pushes to main or on pull requests to main, the first, it's going to do some jobs. And this is kind of the syntax that it uses. The first job is that it's going to lint. And it is running on Ubuntu. So it's going to be a Linux container. So we could use Chromium if we wanted to. We could use Firefox because it's going to be a Linux container. I will probably usually play Firefox because Chromium is only in beta. It doesn't have all the functionality of our replay Firefox. Looks like there's an environment variable for Slack webhook URL. And that is because at the very end, it sends this Slack notification. So we don't need that. I don't want to send a Slack notification to the TipTap team when I do a pull request on my own repo or my own fork. So that's good because I also don't have their GitHub secrets. So that's something that can be removed. So everything revolving this Slack webhook URL can be removed. It looks like it has says strategy matrix node version 16. So it's just using that. I think all this we can leave intact, except just removing that environment variable. Then it's using actions checkout. So checkout is a very, very common GitHub action. Literally, it checks out the code from a specific branch or whatever it may be, and to make sure that it's getting the right SHA, basically. It's called SHA, SHA. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. But it's a very specific either commit, branch, whatever it may be, but a version of the code, it's going to check that out or pull it down or whatever terminology that you want to use. But checkout is what it's named. And so whenever you see that uses syntax, it means that you're using an existing GitHub action. So GitHub Actions, they have a workflow file, which is basically the master list of instructions or the main list of instructions. And then you have individual actions, which are kind of like packages you can think of. So like this is like my script file, and I'm pulling in packages in order to use them throughout my workflow. And those packages, so to speak, are actions. And so I'm using the checkout action. We're using then setup node. So this is using the matrix.node versions. That 16 is being pulled through here. We're going to set up node so that we can leave that in. Loading cache dependencies. We're not really going to have a cache probably, but it looks like what it's doing is it's trying to avoid having to reinstall Cypress every time, which makes sense. So if it is cached, it'll go ahead and just pull down anything that is the same version, which helps to speed up the build run. And I don't see anything here. So runner.os node matrix node version. I don't see anything here that we need to change from what I can tell. And then we're going to install the dependencies, and that's literally just running the npm install. So this is saying if steps.cache, which is this step here, outputs.cache hit does not equal true, then we need to install. So that's saying basically if we didn't find anything cached, if we couldn't load anything from our cache, then we need to go ahead and install our dependencies. So we'll attempt to load the cache dependencies first. If it does not go through, then we'll run npm install. These are commented out. Looks like there was fixing some linting errors. Looks like that's been removed, so we'll leave that out too. And it looks like, okay, it's just kind of using this lint code, npm run lint instead. So it's taking out that functionality and it's using this instead. We'll keep that. And here's the send Slack notification if there's a failure. So we'll take that out, don't need to do that. And then here we get to our test job. So this is what, everything so far looks pretty good. Here's what I'm gonna be making some changes, right? So we're still running on Ubuntu. We're still using Node version 16. We're gonna check out the code again. And we are then going to run the test with Cypress. So this is using Cypress's GitHub Action to run the test. So Cypress, oh yeah, here's our cache key. Interesting. So that's where we've cached the version of Cypress from up here. Okay, cool. Anyway, so yeah, so this is using the Cypress GitHub Action, which instead we're going to be using Replay's GitHub Action. So we're going to need to kind of reproduce some of this functionality. This is the same thing that I did with the Cypress Real World app with our fork. So the Cypress GitHub Action gives you a lot of input options that you can just pass through. So it's saying, I want to use project./tests. I want to use Chrome. I want it to be quiet. First I need to start my server. Then I need to wait on localhost. And so all of that is being passed through to the Cypress GitHub Action, which is then going to do those things. So what we need to do is essentially delete that step using the replay action instead. And then it's exporting screenshots. We can actually get rid of that because we're no longer going to be taking screenshots. We set that to false. Same thing with the screen recordings of the videos. We can move that. And we can take out the send Slack notification. And then it looks like then it has, once it runs the test, then it has a build step. And it'll go through that again, install dependencies, send Slack notification, and it'll try to build the packages. So, okay, that's a rundown of the existing GitHub Action. So let's go ahead and make some changes. So going back to my code editor, again, hopefully you can see this. Again, I'm going to go to this build one, and I'm going to start cleaning some things up. So I mentioned we don't need this Slack web URL. We're going to check everything out there. That all looks fine. We're installing the dependencies. We're running the lint code. We're going to take out the send Slack notifications. We're going to take out the Slack URL hook thing. We're doing test runs on. Steps, checking it out. Okay, so here's the run test with Cypress, and it has an ID of Cypress because we'll probably need to use that in a different area. Usually you assign something an ID if you need to use it, but I don't know if I see that anywhere. Let me just kind of find Cypress. So ID, run Cypress, Cypress. Yeah. Okay, well, it has an ID declared, but it's not being used anywhere. So it's fine. I'll leave it in there. I guess it makes it more clear. And so, okay, here we are at the beginning. So first thing it does is lint the code. This is all linting. So it's essentially checking it out. It's loading the cache dependencies. It's installing dependencies, and it's linting the code. Cool. And now we're getting to where it's going to do the same thing. It's going to check out the code. It's going to check if there's a cache key. So this may be something. Yeah, so we'll take a look and see. I have an ID of Cypress using Cypress GitHub Action, and then npm run start is a command, and we're waiting for localhost 3000. We're running project tests. So if I go back to, I don't need to, it's right here. My package.json start has this kind of like npm -- prefix -- demos run start. So what I really think we should do is to take a look at the action Cypress. But essentially, you can pass through a run command that will do all of these things for us. So if I go back to the Cypress Real World app, our version, this is the Replay.io version. I can see that I'm using Cypress Action, and I'm running a command called npm run test e to e. And what this command is doing, if I go to my package.json, here we go. There are a lot of scripts in here. Test e to e is running yarn start CI. So This is using yarn, so we're going to use an npm, and then yarn test ede run. So first thing it's doing in this single and means that it's kind of running it sequentially, not concurrently, I believe. No, this must mean concurrently. This must mean concurrently. Okay, so I mean sequentially. This is happening. Yeah, no, concurrently. These are happening at the same time. So I'm starting up my CI, and then I'm running the end-to-end run command. So starting up my CI, which is going to, I won't look at that, we'll go to there, but essentially what's doing is it's starting up my server up here, start CI. So it's running my React proxy server, and I'm starting up the API server. Then I'm also running this yarn test end-to-end run test. And what this is doing is it's saying wait. And this is actually sequentially. It has two ands. That's yarn thing. So it's saying sequentially, first thing you do is you wait. And that is going to wait for localhost 3000 to be available. And then, and only then, you're going to run the Cypress yarn run command to patch the spec file. So I need to kind of replicate this behavior in TipTap, where basically I am going to start my server, I'm going to wait for it to load, and I'm going to run my Cypress command all from a single command rather than passing it through to the GitHub Action for Cypress. So I can do that. So what I want to do is, again, come here and just double check what it's doing. So it's npm run start. We're waiting on localhost 3000, and then we're doing the project. So let me come to my package.json, and it's just literally doing npm run start. It's okay. And then it's doing test, and I want to do wait on. And I don't think there's no wait on package in here, so I'll add that. It's a dependency, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to run those things, and then concurrently. Yeah, so it looks like this is using the same syntax here with that and. So npm and yarn must be the same. That's cool. I can do that. And so I'm going to make a command essentially called like test e to e, the same thing that I did. We'll do that. Test e to e. And this command will need to start up the server, wait for the server, and then run our test command with some additional things set up. And again, back in the Cypress Real World app, this is just running our yarn Cypress run command, and Cypress run is just Cypress run. Okay, so the nice thing about the GitHub action that Replay provides is we no longer have to like pass any specific environment variables. We're just essentially just declaring the browser, and it passes it through for us. So I'm going to go ahead and, so what we need to do then is we're doing, first thing we do is start up our server. So we're going to do npm run start and test wait, which is the same thing that we have in the Cypress Real World app example. Yeah, test e to e wait. Or test e to e run. There we go. I'll use that. I'll use the same convention. Make it easy on myself. So I have test e to e run. And then I'm going to do test e to e run, which is going to be, it's going to do wait and then run their command. Yeah, okay, so it's going to just be test e to e wait, which is going to be this. I need to add that as well. So this is going to run npm run test e to e wait, and then that needs to be sequential. That can be concurrent. This needs to be sequential because we have to wait first. And then it's going to go ahead and run the Cypress command, which is test. And then so npm run test. Okay, so what happens, I run test e to e. It starts up my server. At the same time, it kicks off the test e to e run command. So my server is starting up, and then it runs this command. This command will first run wait, and which wait will wait on localhost 3000. And that command has to complete, so we have to be done with waiting before it'll run my tests. So I do need to add wait on to my dependencies. And so let's see, what version do I have of that? I can just find this. Okay, so wait on. I think too, the nice thing about, if I remember correctly, I forget the VS Code, if I like come into my dependencies and I type in like wait on and I do that, yeah, it'll show me like the versions that are available and I can just select it. That's so cool. I love that. Okay, so I've added wait on, I've updated the commands that I can use, and now I can switch over to my build file again, and I can kind of replace out the Cypress GitHub action with the replay GitHub action. So the only other thing here is we can see that it has a project of /tests, but it seems like I'm already passing that flag through. So that seems like there's two of them. It doesn't need to be two of them. And then the browser is Chrome. And so we get the replay GitHub action has the same thing where we can essentially pass that through. So I just noticed the time. So it is coming up on the hour. So I guess we'll have to stop there, which is unfortunate because we're really making some good progress. But while I'm here, I'll just go ahead and really quickly clean out those two steps, this step as well. But yeah, so all I really need to do now is just actually implement the replay action. So, which I will show here was really, really briefly. So replay IO /action Cypress. You're literally you're passing through your API key, you're passing through your issue number. This actually is now browser, so it needs to be updated. So we're gonna pass through our browser that we wanna use, and then we can pass through the command. And so that's where I'm going to essentially replace that. So if I were really quickly, come back here to my main, and we're kind of replicating this step here, so go ahead and copy that over. So instead of this, and it's going to be tough because I don't know about the caching thing. We may not be able, I don't know if that's going to work the same way. We'll have to figure that out. I'm just going to paste that in here. And this is going to be run tests with replay, run Cypress tests. We're using the action. So our command is npm run test e to e, and that correlates to here. We're going to use replay Firefox. We'll add our API key, public is true. GitHub event.pull_request.number. So this is provided by GitHub. So because we have a pull request that we're pushing on, actually, I'm going to go ahead and take off that push to main. It's going to be just for pull requests. On pull request to main, we're going to actually pass through the pull request number, and that's what's going to prompt that comment back on the original PR. And we're going to set upload all to true. So once I set up my API key, this is what's going to run the tests and replay and report them. And that's really the only change that I needed to make. I will say the only difference is that the cache key, I'm not sure if I'll get an error there, but because we're loading cache dependencies and we're installing dependencies, I may need to move that install to, within this job. But if not, then we'll see if it's able to pick up on that location in order to cache that and run the tests. But yeah, otherwise that's it. Kind of took a little bit longer than I expected, mostly because I was kind of explaining and trying to dig into stuff along the way. But hopefully you learned something about either replay, Cypress, or GitHub Actions. And yeah, I'm hoping to do some more kind of getting set up with these kind of things. If you have a project with Cypress tests and you are interested in getting set up, or Playwright tests too, we have Playwright as well. Let us know, hop into our Discord and chat with us. We can see what your setup looks like. We can help you get it configured, replay.io/Discord. So Yeah, thanks so much for tuning in and watching me kind of hack away on some actions, and we'll see you next week. Cheers.